The young and the restless spoiler Summer's ambition had always been the force behind her every move, but on this fateful evening, her determination to seize power took on a dangerously devious form. Behind the polished facade of Genoa City's elite, Summer orchestrated a scheme that was as audacious as it was ruthless. Her target was none other than Claire, a woman whose life was a constant balancing act between the fierce loyalty demanded by love and the relentless pressures of a family legacy in the corporate world. With each passing day, Claire's struggle to maintain her integrity amid familial expectations and professional ambitions made her an easy target for misinterpretation and manipulation. For years, Claire had tried to tread the delicate line between her personal desires and the heavy burden of familial duty. She had always believed that one could remain true to oneself even when caught in the crossfire of conflicting loyalties. Yet, her unwavering commitment to both her heart and her heritage left her vulnerable to those who sought to exploit any perceived weakness. And Summer, with her calculating mind and simmering ambition, saw this vulnerability as the perfect opportunity to strike. The catalyst for Summer's plot was the simmering mistrust between Jack and Claire, a mistrust that had festered over time. Jack, whose protective instincts over the family legacy were well known, had never fully trusted Claire. His suspicions were further inflamed by the persistent presence of Kyle, whose actions, however inadvertently, only served to deepen Jack's doubts. In Jack's eyes, any closeness between Claire and Kyle was a potential threat to the sanctity of the family's honor. Every interaction between them was loaded with an unspoken accusation, a hidden motive waiting to be unraveled. Summer, fully aware of these undercurrents, decided to exploit them. She believed that by dismantling the fragile bond between Claire and the family, she could elevate her own standing and secure her position of power. Her plan was both simple and diabolical: fabricate evidence that would paint Claire as a treacherous betrayer, a turncoat who had sided with Kyle against the family's interests. To achieve this, Summer turned her attention to a damning piece of evidence in Kyle's possession, something incriminating enough to convince even the most skeptical observer. With meticulous precision, she manipulated and altered the evidence, ensuring that it would seem indisputable and irrefutable to anyone who laid eyes on it. Summer's next step was to present this falsified evidence to Victor, knowing full well that his trust in her far outweighed any latent doubt he might have about her intentions. With the stage set, she approached Victor in a moment of private counsel, confidently laying out her version of the events. Her tone was measured, almost compassionate, as she described the betrayal of someone who had once been a trusted confidant. Victor, caught between the conflicting loyalties of his heart and his duty to the family, felt the weight of the evidence and the betrayal it represented. His eyes hardened with resolve, and in that moment, he decided to act decisively to protect the sanctity of the family's legacy. The fallout was swift and brutal. Jack, who had already harbored deep-seated mistrust towards Claire, was quick to believe Summer's machinations. His loyalty to Summer and his commitment to preserving the family's honor overrode any remaining doubts he might have had about the authenticity of the evidence. In a fit of anger and betrayal, Jack confronted Claire in a confrontation that would etch itself into the annals of the family's dark history. As emotions ran high, Jack's fury boiled over, and in a shocking display of violence, he grabbed Claire by the throat. His voice, thick with rage, thundered in the quiet room as he commanded her to leave, decreeing that she must sever all ties with their world, never to show her face again. For Claire, the moment was a nightmare brought to life. The shock and horror of Jack's betrayal, combined with the public nature of the accusation, shattered her world. Tears streamed down her face as she pleaded her innocence, her voice trembling with desperation. She tried to explain that the evidence was not a true reflection of her loyalty, that the bond between her and the family was unbreakable. But her words, laden with genuine sorrow and regret, fell on deaf ears. The carefully orchestrated deception had done its work. Summer's machinations had succeeded in painting Claire as the villain, and now every member of the family, including Kyle, saw her through the lens of treachery. Kyle, who had once been an ally and confidant to Claire, found himself in a state of disbelief and anguish. The evidence, tainted and manipulated as it was, forced him to confront a painful reality: the possibility that Claire had betrayed them all. His heart ached as he recalled the countless moments of shared trust and camaraderie, each memory now overshadowed by the stain of accusation. Though he too tried to argue in Claire's defense, his words were drowned out by the chorus of condemnation and the fury of a family betrayed. As days turned into weeks, the atmosphere within the household grew increasingly tense and suffocating. Every conversation, every whispered suspicion, seemed to revolve around the scandal that had erupted. Summer, basking in the glow of her apparent victory, watched with cold satisfaction as the once cherished relationships crumbled into dust. Yet, even as she celebrated her triumph, a lingering question gnawed at the edges of her mind: would the truth ever come to light? Had she truly secured her place in the family's hierarchy, or was she merely postponing an inevitable reckoning? Unbeknownst to Summer, the seeds of her deceit were beginning to sprout doubts in the minds of those she had manipulated. Small inconsistencies in her story, minor oversights in the evidence, and the lingering memory of Claire's unwavering loyalty began to cast shadows over her carefully constructed narrative. Some family members, troubled by an innate sense of justice and driven by whispers of their own suspicions, started to quietly investigate the origins of the evidence. They began to piece together fragments of conversations and inconsistencies that hinted at a deeper conspiracy at play, a conspiracy that pointed to the mastermind behind the betrayal. Meanwhile, Claire, despite the crushing weight of the false accusations, refused to surrender her dignity. In the solitude of her despair, she resolved to uncover the truth behind the evidence that had so wrongfully condemned her. Every sleepless night, every tear-soaked day, was dedicated to retracing her steps, searching for any clue that could expose the real architect of this insidious plot. Her determination was fueled by a blend of heartache and a burning desire for vindication, a desire to clear her name and restore the fractured bonds that once held the family together. In a dramatic turn of events, whispers of Summer's duplicity began to reach the ears of a few trusted allies within the family circle. These allies, moved by their own doubts and haunted by memories of Claire's unblemished loyalty, started to dig deeper into the origins of the evidence. As they uncovered a trail of inconsistencies and deliberate manipulations, the once ironclad case against Claire began to unravel. The discovery was slow and perilous, as each revelation brought with it the risk of further internal strife and the potential for irreversible damage to the family's reputation. Jack, still reeling from the intensity of his own betrayal, found himself torn between his unwavering loyalty to Summer and the gnawing suspicion that something was amiss. The weight of his actions, the physical violence, the emotional scars, began to haunt him in quiet moments of reflection. In the solitude of his private study, he revisited every moment leading up to that fateful confrontation, each memory now marred by doubt and regret. Was it possible that he had been manipulated, that his judgment had been clouded by the fervor of anger and loyalty? As the tension mounted and the investigation into the fabricated evidence gathered momentum, the once impenetrable walls of deception began to crumble. The truth, as it often does, fought its way to the surface, threatening to expose not only the betrayal of a single individual but the intricate web of ambition, jealousy, and deceit that had ensnared them all. Summer, now increasingly isolated by her own machinations, found herself facing the possibility of retribution. The very ambition that had driven her to orchestrate the downfall of those around her was now turning against her, as those she had betrayed began to question her motives and her integrity. In the midst of this turmoil, the family was forced to confront the painful reality of how ambition and jealousy could warp even the purest of loyalties. The journey towards redemption and reconciliation would be long and fraught with challenges, as each member grappled with the consequences of their choices. For Claire, the road to vindication was just beginning, marked by the determination to reclaim her honor and rebuild the trust that had been so ruthlessly shattered. For Jack, it was a path of introspection and, ultimately, accountability, a chance to confront the darkness within his own heart and seek forgiveness for the unthinkable actions he had taken. And so, amid the storm of betrayal and the slow, inevitable march towards the truth, the intricate dance of loyalty, ambition, and revenge continued to play out. The question that now loomed over everyone was not just whether Summer's treachery would be exposed, but what the cost of that exposure would be. Would the family be able to heal from the deep wounds inflicted by deceit, or would the revelations tear them apart irrevocably? Only time would tell if the sins of ambition would be forgiven or if they would forever stain the legacy of those caught in the web of deceit. In the shadowed corridors of Genoa City's most storied family estates, betrayal had long been the currency of power. Yet, no one could have foreseen the depths of deception that would soon tear the Abbott dynasty apart. The recent series of treacherous acts had left scars on every soul touched by the storm of ambition and envy. Now, with wounds barely healed and alliances dangerously shifting, a new chapter of turmoil was set to unfold, a conflict that threatened to shatter not just reputations but the very fabric of familial loyalty. It all began when Summer, whose ambition had long simmered beneath a composed exterior, executed her cunning plan to dismantle Claire's standing within the family. By fabricating damning evidence that implicated Claire in a web of betrayal, Summer had successfully manipulated Victor and Jack into turning against the one person they once believed epitomized loyalty and honor. Her meticulous plot had seemingly borne fruit, leaving Claire distraught and determined to reclaim her tarnished name. Yet, the echoes of betrayal did not stop there. In a surprising twist, amidst the chaos of accusations and shifting allegiances, Kyle stepped forward with an unexpected gesture. In a moment heavy with the weight of conflicting loyalties, Kyle embraced Summer. His arms around her, he murmured words of gratitude, thanking her for her staunch support of the Abbott family. The irony was palpable. Summer, after all, was not only a fierce schemer but also Victor's granddaughter, a scion of a legacy that had long been embroiled in internal power struggles. However, Summer maintained an aloof detachment from the brewing family feud. Rather than plunging herself into the maelstrom of conflict, she chose to stand apart, her gaze fixed on the unfolding drama like a detached spectator. She would watch, waiting to see who would ultimately emerge as the victor, confident that the combatants would soon reveal their true colors in a face-off that she would not directly engage in. Yet, while Kyle's embrace of Summer signified one faction's endorsement, it further ignited the simmering tensions between the remaining members of the family. Claire, already burning with the fire of injustice, was now consumed by a fierce desire for vengeance. Her heart, seared by betrayal and the cold dismissal of her pleas for understanding, swore retribution. "I will make you pay, Summer," she declared in a voice that trembled with both grief and fury, a promise that she would settle the score regardless of the cost. Even as her words echoed through the halls, her focus was not solely on Summer, but on the entire apparatus of deceit that had upended the lives of those she once trusted. As the battle lines were redrawn, Victor, the patriarch of a legacy built on power and calculated decisions, was forced to confront a bitter reality. His two granddaughters, each a fierce spirit in her own right, were now locked in a bitter conflict. The familial ties that once bound them together were fraying at the edges, replaced by a toxic cocktail of hatred and betrayal. For Victor, this division was more than just a personal failure, it was a threat to the very future of his empire. The delicate balance of power he had spent a lifetime constructing now teetered on the edge of chaos, as the relentless ambition of the younger generation threatened to engulf the family in an all-out war. In the midst of this internal strife, Jack found himself at a crossroads. Torn between his long-held loyalty to the family and the undeniable evidence presented by Summer, Jack's mind became a battlefield of conflicting emotions. He knew that his duty was to protect the legacy he had helped build, yet he could not shake the nagging feeling that something was amiss. Every calculated decision now carried the weight of potential disaster, and the onus was on him to unravel the tangled threads of deceit and determine who was truly responsible for the ruination of trust. Jack's internal torment deepened as he recalled the harrowing confrontation with Claire, a moment that had scarred him both physically and emotionally. The memory of his own anger, the shock of his violent outburst, and the unmistakable taste of regret all converged to haunt his every waking moment. He was left to ponder, was it truly Claire who had betrayed them all, or had she become the unfortunate victim of a much larger, more insidious plot orchestrated by someone cunning enough to pit family members against each other? The answer, it seemed, was as elusive as it was dangerous. Each new piece of information that surfaced only added to the growing sense of uncertainty. Rumors began to circulate behind closed doors, whispers of inconsistencies in the evidence, and hints of manipulation that suggested that Summer's carefully constructed narrative might not be as airtight as it appeared. Some family members, driven by a desperate need for the truth, started to quietly piece together the disparate fragments of the puzzle. The process was slow and perilous, fraught with the risk of further inciting the simmering animosity that already plagued the household. Amid this backdrop of suspicion and heartbreak, the meeting of hearts and minds took place in the dim light of an abandoned drawing room, where Jack, Victor, and a small council of trusted advisors gathered. In that charged atmosphere, Jack was forced to confront the stark reality of their situation. His voice, heavy with the burden of responsibility, broke the silence as he laid out the predicament before them. We must ask ourselves, who is the true saboteur in this family? Who has spun this web of deceit that now threatens to tear us apart? Jack's words reverberated through the room, a plea for clarity in a time of moral and emotional darkness. The council, their expressions etched with worry and uncertainty, nodded in solemn agreement, knowing that the answer could determine the future of their legacy. Victor, his gaze fixed on the distant memories of a more unified past, spoke with a voice that carried both sorrow and determination. My granddaughters, each so full of life and promise, are now caught in a war not of their choosing. This family cannot survive if we allow hatred and mistrust to dictate our actions. We must seek the truth, no matter how painful it may be, and restore the bonds that have been broken. His words, laden with the weight of a lifetime's worth of experience, underscored the gravity of their mission. As the meeting progressed, the council began to piece together a tentative framework of the events that had led to their current predicament. The evidence, though damning in many respects, was riddled with gaps and inconsistencies. It became increasingly clear that the narrative had been manipulated, its original intent obscured by layers of deceit. The more they delved into the matter, the more it became apparent that Summer's actions, though seemingly in support of the Abbott family, had been calculated to serve her own ambitions rather than any noble purpose. Kyle's earlier embrace of Summer, a gesture that had appeared to signal loyalty, was now reinterpreted under the harsh light of scrutiny. It was evident that Summer, by choosing to remain a bystander in the unfolding conflict, was playing a far more dangerous game than anyone had anticipated. Her detachment was not born of neutrality, but of a cold, calculated desire to watch the pieces fall exactly where she had planned, ensuring that, when the dust settled, the victor would be the one who had cunningly manipulated the situation to her advantage. Meanwhile, Claire's fierce vow for vengeance continued to simmer beneath the surface. Although her anger was directed outward, the emotional toll of being falsely accused and publicly shunned had left deep scars. Despite her determination to retaliate against Summer, she found herself increasingly isolated, her cries for justice echoing in a void that seemed to absorb all hope. Her struggle was not merely one of personal vindication but also a desperate bid to salvage the remnants of trust that had once held the family together. The council's deliberations grew more intense, and it soon became clear that a decision had to be made. Jack, bearing the heavy mantle of responsibility, took a deep breath as he addressed the gathered advisors one final time. We must now decide, who is the true saboteur, and how do we proceed to heal the wounds that have been inflicted upon our family? His tone was resolute, a man who had experienced the bitter taste of regret and was determined not to let the same fate befall them all. After long hours of debate and the careful examination of every shred of evidence, a consensus began to emerge. It was evident that while Claire's actions had contributed to the turmoil, she was not the mastermind behind the manipulation. The real architect of the chaos was none other than Summer, a woman who had, with meticulous precision, exploited the vulnerabilities within the family for her own gain. Her cold detachment, her willingness to let the granddaughters clash while she watched from the sidelines, and her cunning orchestration of evidence had all pointed to a singular truth: Summer was the true saboteur, the puppet master behind the downfall of trust and unity. In the final moments of the meeting, Jack's voice resonated with the clarity of hard-won insight. Summer's ambition has driven her to orchestrate this destruction, all while pretending to stand aside. Her support for the Abbott family was nothing more than a calculated move, one that has left us with two granddaughters at war and a legacy hanging by a thread.